Okay, welcome to the Town of Hatfield Finance Committee budget presentation. This will be available for people to see prior to town meeting. It's an explanation of how we put together the bulk of the budget. There's still some things in play that haven't been fully decided, but this is the majority of the tax revenue spending and the priorities and how we've chosen to address those. So we have a little slide presentation that we're going to go through. It's the first time we've done this to my knowledge, so we're going to be going for it. So we're starting out with just priorities for the year. And one is meeting the needs of Hatfield residents, including all the services that people expect. Services for veterans, services for the elderly, library, town maintenance, and public works. To provide adequate funding to maintain educational quality of the public schools and support the current service level. Make budget adjustments for actual prior year spending when possible and practical. And Andrew did a lot of this work going through the budget and trying to look back at actual spending from prior years to see where we could maybe adjust individual lines. So some of that has gone on. It's not always 100% practical to do that because sometimes things change, but that's what we've tried to do some of. And improve Hatfield's ability to be competitive when hiring qualified personnel and retaining our current staff. Hatfield has not been particularly competitive in terms of the benefits, particularly that we offer. We pay an extremely low percentage of health insurance relative to probably what most people are doing. We had, 3 years ago? 3 years ago, gone up to 55%?
I think it was 2 years ago.
Okay, yeah, we went from 50 to 55%. This budget will try to move that to 60%, which still I don't think puts us on par with a lot of plans, but we're trying to move in the right direction. And to support capital and infrastructure needs and address deferred maintenance. We have some projects that we've been kicking down the road for a number of years. Many years, some of them, and we're going to try to address those. And sometimes for good reasons, and it's turned out that some of those reasons no longer exist, so we need to deal with them now. So one of the things that really does impact the budget is fixed costs and things that we just have to cover. And a lot of that actually has stabilized in this budget. We went through a long period of time, I think, for the last 2 or 3 years, would you say, where energy costs were really rising and fuel costs and other costs, and we sort of have been ramping up those budgets, and we reached a point where we were over what we needed, and so it worked out good in the respect that we're able to stabilize that at least for now. We'll see what happens going forward, but at least for this year. But that's not true of health insurance and retirement. And just like briefly on these two items, we're part of the Hampshire County Health Insurance Trust, which if you look at the increases over the last several years has been an excellent deal for the town, especially if you look over the last 6 or 7 years. We've had some years with no increases. We had a year with a negative increase, a decrease, which is absolutely really unheard of. Some of that was due to the fact that they had a large trust fund that had more money in it than they needed, and they used that money to offset price increases. And now that is coming home to roost, so to speak, and we wind up with the increase isn't quite 32%. I think it's more like 23. Would that be accurate? More like 23%. But if you include the 5% increase in the town contribution to employees' health care, the entire amount is a 32% increase. So
Right.
it was whether to break it out or put it in the same slide, and it just chose to do it this way. And retirement is funny. It's partially based on your salaries and how many people you have working for the town and what the anticipated, and how many retirees you have in the system going into the system. But some of it is also based on returns that the retirement system makes on money that it has. And if those, and you're trying to fully fund the system by a date certain. So, it's a mixed, you never know what the increase might be or not be. It just depends on how it performs at some level.
Right.
So this is how we addressed some of the priorities. We did do a cost of living adjustment for all of the non-contracted employees, which matches the contracted increase that most of our employees will be getting as well. So that covers a significant percentage of all the employees in town at 2.7%. It would exclude people who are under individual contract that they negotiate for the first, if they've negotiated a separate agreement. So those people would not be included, but pretty much everyone else is. It increases support for departments, staff, for COA, assessors, planning board, and public safety. So there's some increases in salary there, and also some increases in hours. Did I miss anything there?
Yeah, you missed town clerk.
Oh,
Oh,
and we
had
talked
that.
about that too this afternoon, about adding it.
Which
And we-
would fit right
Yes,
into this.
It's the same thing,
That's
yeah,
funny
Yeah, it's the
because
same thing, right.
right?
we had that.
We talked about it, but yeah. So yes, and the town clerk. So I think we have some really good people in a lot of those positions, some of whom have been in those positions for a long time. And as we have a tendency to find out, replacing people, particularly in those kinds of positions, is always more expensive than keeping the people that we have. So it also includes a 2.5% increase for the town-funded portion of the school budget. That doesn't represent the entire amount that the school is going to spend, but it represents the town's contribution. It's quite reasonable, given the current state of a lot of school situations.
Yeah. Could commend the school committee
Yeah.
and the superintendent for really working hard to come up with a budget that works for them, but also works for the town, which is really great.
And it really keeps us competitive in their mind in terms of
Absolutely.
attracting students, which is great, especially at a time when a lot of other people are reducing.
Right.
And as I said, it increases the town contribution to employee health insurance premiums from 55% to 60%. Sorry. All right, so free cash.
Let's pause for a moment
yeah.
because I think we had some updated figures. I want to try to find those. So
Okay.
I don't want to break your flow, but let's just
Yep.
pause for a moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah,
I feel like there was updated figures that I sent you. Yeah, that's weird. This isn't showing up properly.
right, did it not? Nope, that's the old one.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, this is, because we made all those changes.
bro. Oh, no.
Oh, this number is correct, but not everything is saved. Okay.
All right, well, we'll have to make some adjustments on the fly because we made some changes earlier that, this is all correct. There's no,
Let's see if what I sent you is the correct one. Just give me one
yeah,
second.
let's check.
Sorry for everyone having to read my computer. But let's see if this worked correctly. No, it really doesn't. So I'm not sure what happened because we made some changes this afternoon, but that's fine. We'll work with
All right.
this.
Yeah, we'll make some, there's some minor changes to some of this, and we'll actually get to it in a minute here. It's most of the changes we'll get to in a minute. Sorry.
Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
right there.
That's so strange.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. So that is the snow and ice from FY25. We'll be covering that with free cash. That is the way we've always done it, way most people do it. MS4 compliance, do you want to go into that a little bit, Andrew, or not even go into it a little bit, just explain it a bit?
Just very quickly. So the state and the federal governments both passed updated regulations for municipalities with small stormwater systems and expect them to be making certain progress and be reporting on both regulations and the status of their stormwater systems. We are behind on that reporting and on our permitting for this permit that's issued to municipalities for MS4. And we plan to contract with our engineers, folks who we typically use, but we will obviously do everything through proper procurement to get assistance with this, both on passing a stormwater construction and post-construction regulations and bylaws that need to be passed, and in getting assistance from them for all the reporting and permitting that needs to happen. So they've given us an estimate. It's both a project and kind of an annual consulting amount. So we've been able to put some of this into the annual budget, which I think makes sense. But then we'll be asking for $90,000 from the town in the warrant this year, town meeting, to get this one-time assistance to kind of bring us up to date right now on this permitting. It's something that a lot of municipalities are dealing with right now. The stormwater regulations from the state are a lot more intense than they used to be. They're absolutely necessary. It makes a lot of sense that we're treating this as carefully as we need to be, especially just with our status as a community by the river, everything else. But it is a lot of work to get there, and we haven't invested in that in the past. A lot of municipalities are in the same position that they're doing this now. So we have an agreement with EPA that will be making certain progress by next February, and this will put us on the path to do that.
All right, thanks. Also replacing some fire hydrants. I think that's fairly obvious. Replacing the carpets at Smith Academy. I'm fairly certain that those are the same carpets that were there when I went to Smith Academy. So.
And when I started at Smith Academy.
Yeah. So
before you went to Smith Academy.
So they're due. You know, a new police cruiser and an amount for stabilization and post-employee benefits to plan for future retirees from the town and their benefits, so we can begin to chip away at future expenses.
Do we want to mention that free cash in total is $1.1 million?
We should.
And I believe, what do we have left? 600,000? Is that correct?
I think later in this meeting we can go through the free cash model and talk more about what's available.
Yeah, I mean, this is not every single thing. Yeah. This is the major things that we think we have some agreement on at some level at the moment. There's minor other things like $1,100 for prior year bill. I mean, there's like some little items that we'll certainly be on the sheet at town meeting, but didn't feel like anyone probably wanted to talk too much about them. Mm-hmm. They're mostly minor cleanup stuff.
We have a stormwater assessment piece that's coming out of here, right?
That's the 90. That's
okay.
Yeah. So the numbers here are a little hairy, but the top number is the most important one.
Correct.
That's correct. Debt exclusion.
Yeah, we redid this earlier.
Yeah, we fixed debit exclusion as well. So I'm not sure.
We fixed a lot of this earlier. I don't know what happened, but that's all right. It's still the top number is still the correct number. It may not include much contingency the way we have it actually. But these are 3 projects that we believe need to be done. One of these projects we've been talking about, the paving, we've been talking about for 6 years now.
6 years, yeah.
I would guess that it's increased significantly in cost. Yeah, since we first started talking about it, and it's not fixing itself. So eventually,
and it's not going to get cheaper.
Yeah, eventually we're going to have to take this on, and it's just a matter of how much we want it to cost at this point. No,
We'll never have enough free cash to do it.
no, that's correct. So that is one of the projects. And if you've been down Billings Way and or used the parking lots at Smith Academy or the elementary school, it speaks for itself,
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, yeah.
They need to be replaced. New roof on the elementary school, which also needs to be replaced. I know we think of the elementary school as being new, and relative to Smith Academy, it is pretty new, but we're also done paying for it.
23 years old.
Yeah, so it's been a while. We held off on this project for several years. The school spent significant money repairing the roof on a regular basis. And we held off on the project because we were waiting for it to be old enough to qualify for the state's school building assistance program, which it does not qualify any longer. They've moved the deadline back to, is it 30 years now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 30 years. So we would have to wait another 7 years to do that. And that's not practical at this point. And also, I think it's important to remember that everybody else who is waiting is also being pushed back. So there's going to be more people in line by the time you get to the 30 years. So waiting for it just doesn't make sense.
There was also a grant program that the schools heard about probably a year ago and did a lot of the groundwork to be ready for it when it was released, and it hasn't been released. And they also have learned that we won't really even qualify for that program, even when they do release it. So it's something that it's just that there's not going to be any money coming from anybody else to help pay for this. We got to figure this out on our own.
And new boilers for the elementary school, which is a project we need to take on right away. They need to be replaced. It's not something we can wait to find out, when they don't work anymore. We need to do it over the summer when there's no kids in the school. Having to close the school during the school year to do that would be a disaster. So it's something that we need to fix, and we need to fix it on a time schedule. That's the proposal.
Yeah.
And we're adjusting numbers as we go, which is.
Yeah, it's just the boilers are just another project that the school has spent a lot of money to try and repair and upkeep them, and the current company they work with is saying they need to be replaced now.
And if we have to do it on an emergency basis, it's going to be more expensive. Right. And closing down the school and figuring out what to do with the kids is something we don't even want to have to think about.
Right.
So it really makes sense to do this. And I swear we adjusted these numbers earlier today. I know.
It's just a version control thing.
Yeah. And so this is the tax impact of the debt exclusion. It's not exactly right, although it's really close, I will tell you. We reworked the numbers a little bit today. It's actually going to wind up being
55,
slightly
43.
less. It's $165 per year, or like 12 something a month. Is that
1379.
$13.79?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it not a huge difference, but some. That's for the average tax bill on a single family home in Hatfield, which is valued at $450,000, which is significantly more valuation than it was only a few years ago. But I think just to point out, because I don't know that this is universally understood, valuation doesn't have anything to do with the amount of money that the town takes in. It is not in any way related. If valuations go up, the tax rate goes down. It is a self-leveling mechanism. It does not add more. It only compares the value of your property to the value of somebody else's property. That's all it does, really. So it has no impact on the amount of money that the town takes in on a property by property basis. It does change that, but overall it makes no difference in the town in that way. So the other thing for your consideration is a policy and service question, I think, for the residents of the town, which is an ambulance fire override. So this is not a debt exclusion. This would be a operating override, which means it would go on forever. So just say that 24/7, this is in essence what you would get, and other people may speak further to this at town meeting. This is my understanding, and I think our understanding of what it essentially gets, which is 24/7 coverage for ambulance and fire, an increase from the current standard 16-hour day. It funds backfill for paid time off, sick time, other things that happen when shifts don't get filled because somebody is using a benefit time. So now it would cover funding those shifts. It would provide, the fire chief has numbers about the reduced response time that occurs when the Hatfield ambulance responds versus an out-of-town ambulance. And that varies depending on which out-of-town ambulance we're talking about. Obviously, Northampton can get here much faster normally than South County does, I would think, or certainly than Highland in Goshen. Yeah.
Right, or Amherst. Yeah.
So it also would take the fire chief outside of the standard coverage rotation and make the fire chief a full-time fire chief and overseeing the ambulance. It does not mean he would not support the ambulance when needed. It just tends to be that now he is one of the full-time paramedics who's riding the ambulance.
Are we going to talk about temporary buildings?
Oh, yes, sorry.
So
We should. No, you're absolutely right. So part of this proposal for the $480,000, this pretty much includes everything we've built into this money for insurance for people that we would hire. Although it's not entirely full-time people. There'd be a lot of per diems who would not get insurance or benefits from the town, but there would be some of those folks. So it would cover that. It would also cover the lease on a temporary structure, a trailer, essentially, for those people to live in because they will be doing 24/7 coverage. So that means they're here overnight. So they sleep on that overnight shift and they need a place to be. So this includes the lease on that trailer. As we said, that's a temporary solution to that problem of having a place for those folks to be. So presumably there at some point in time, if we continue with a 24/7 department, it needs to include some kind of a permanent solution to that issue. Yeah, and
Right.
that has not been determined exactly what that full permanent solution is, but it would have to be some kind of building.
Right.
Either renovation or new structure, something else, but something would have to be done at some point in time. And I guess the estimate is that lasts 3 to 5 years or something. So it's essentially a problem that we'd be looking at on that timeline. We'd have to figure out what to do about that. So this is the tax impact of the override. This is also this is accurate. Oh,
Yep.
okay, sorry. Yep. Oh, that's right. It didn't change much when we.
It wouldn't have changed at all
Yeah.
because what we changed was just the
The total,
expectations
right.
of the debt exclusion per year
Right.
bond payment amount.
Right. It's the next slide that changed.
We'll change a little bit.
Yeah.
I think by $1.
Yeah. So the average tax bill, again, the valuation of $450,000. You can guesstimate where you would fall based on your own valuation relative to the $450,000. It would be an increase of $23 a month or $273 per year. And this would be, should both of these items pass, this would be the total that goes down to 37, right?
Yeah.
Right. And of course, the debt exclusion, once we pay it off, would come off in
It would, we'd have
15
to,
years.
yeah.
And we're anticipating it will be 10 years for the paving projects and 25 for the boiler and
Right.
roof, I would think.
Right.
But that'll depend on what bond council says.
Or 20.
I should say the debt exclusion is an estimate. It would depend on, what the bond council tells us. I mean, it's going to be fairly close. We separated out the 10-year and the 20-25 year. So
Right.
it'll be close. And just to put this into context, I think it is important just for the overall budget to realize that, so I don't know if anyone watched the last meeting we were in with the selectmen, we were having a conversation about how we were underneath the levy limit last year. So a little further digging, we were under the levy limit because we had debt exclusion that we didn't use for the sewer project. So this year that will start to come online, not the actual sewer, not the actual new system. I don't think probably for another.
Well, this
months.
fiscal year,
This fiscal year, it will.
January
yes,
of
that's right.
2026.
Right.
So we'll have half a year with
Yeah.
that project being
So it'll be
completed, and
complete.
We'll have to start paying some debt off.
We'll have to
Yeah.
pay it, correct. And so that was a debt exclusion that we voted on 2 years ago, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
2 years ago, or did we added to it last year?
Mhm.
Yes. We started it 2 years ago, right?
Yeah,
Because we
started at 12 and then
Right.
it had to, we had to,
1.7.
add a little.
Right.
So that has not impacted the tax rate fully
Right.
at this point, and it won't. It will start to this year, but it has not yet, even though we voted on it, because it doesn't happen until you borrow the money and start paying it back. And because the project, in the first year, we did a bunch of design work. So we used how that works is you're going to borrow on a short-term note until the project is complete. So through the construction project, you borrow on basically 1-year notes for the duration of the construction period. when the project is done, all the bills are in, everything is paid, and we know what the actual cost is, you issue the permanent financing. And that has not happened yet.
I will say we're paying interest on that temporary financing, but not principal
principal.
payments. So the principal and the interest will all kick in. Once the construction is complete, it converts to USDA loans.
It's an excellent rate and an
Yeah.
excellent deal from USDA.
It's going to be a 40-year loan, and 13 million sounds like a lot of, it is a lot of money, but over 40 years, the impact to the average taxpayer is not
Spread out quite a bit.
spread
value.
out. Yeah.
Which makes sense. Presumably the project is going to last 40 years. So everyone who pays for it in their taxes will get the benefit of it, rather than having it paid for all up front.
It's 40 years and at a very good annual percentage of borrowing the money too.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Less than 3%.
Yeah, you get a discounted rate through USDA. So it's an excellent deal. But right now we're on short-term notes, but we're not paying any principal. So we're not feeling any of that in terms of the, and so that will be, with this year's budget and the standard increase, that will be on top of it, and it will be a significant portion of what the increase is. Slightly less than half will be due to debt exclusion. So that's just something to think about. It doesn't, in no way impacts our need to do some of the projects for sure.
Right.
It's not a situation where we have other alternatives.
Right.
It's already built into tax bills folks will receive.
Well, yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the sewer plant debt will be, I don't know if they decided, but some of it will be borne on the users through rates. And right? Have we?
I mean, that's not a decision that we get to make.
That's the select board gets to make that decision. So
It's unclear.
As much as we can do that, we will find ways to take that on. I think that makes sense.
Other things have gone over to the rates
Yes.
that were being paid for by the town. So there is some room to maneuver there.
Right.
But we do, as we're taking on this big project for a minority of users, people who can access it, it might be a time to think about what is a reasonable split between
percentage.
taxpayers and ratepayers is.
And we'll be having that discussion shortly after town meeting and the town elections.
Well, we'll be having,
Some point at the end of May, early June, we'll
Yeah.
be having those conversations.
Yeah.
Or at least the
Yeah, I
select
think
board
the
will.
attention, I mean, it's the finance committee's opinion, I think, anyone can correct me if we discuss this, but that we should set those rates as quickly as possible, because one of the reasons that rates went up so dramatically last year is because we didn't set the rate early enough to include both bills.
Correct.
So you got the entire increase in one bill instead of spread out over two bills, which would have made it half as large at one moment. I mean, it still would have been the whole thing, but it wouldn't have come all at one time. And I think that's, that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
We lost time and so had to make up for that.
Our tax rate on real estate goes up 2.5% every year. And we have talked to the selectmen in the past about at least making sure that water sewer rates
Are increasing.
are increasing,
Absolutely.
maybe at least 2.5% every year going forward.
Yeah, and especially when you're taking out a $13 million sewer project.
Yep.
Right.
We're still, I mean, we're still paying for the sand filter
Oh, yeah.
at the water treatment facility.
What, 1990 or 1980 something?
I don't even remember.
It was a long time ago.
You found the right one, Sean.
Oh, good. I was likely just out of high school when we built that.
Yeah.
I don't think there was anything else that we didn't catch, but this is the correct document.
Oh, good. Yeah, I think we fixed everything else on the fly. But this is the problem when you have too many versions of too many different things.
And it's just the way that this version of Windows saves things, which is very good. So, were there any questions from the committee after reading through this presentation? Is there anything we wanted to make sure we touched on?
Are we going to go through, you said something earlier about free cash,
I think that would make sense.
Yeah, we can do that.
just so townspeople.
Just trying to think like anything else that's outstanding at this point. So at Tuesday's meeting, the select board will vote on the warrant. And in the warrant, there's a number of free cash decisions that are in there.
Yeah.
We've already made the decision to move the debt exclusion and the override vote to the ballot and to the warrant. So that's good. And then just final budget position, and we can show that as well. But yeah.
So I do have one question. As we go to town meeting, will we be have two budgets, one with the fire department or the override, and then one without it?
So we don't need to do that. I talked to town council, and the way that it's typically done is that we have our budget, which is the budget that we look to pass. And then the override would just be on top of that. And if that fails, then we revert to the budget that we've passed. If it passes the override, we know how the money will be spent. It's right. Already allocated towards fire department, personnel, and associated costs. Yeah. So we don't need to add another budget to it. We know that we have this override amount, and we know where it will go to.
Yeah, that makes sense, because it's not falling to a bunch of different things potentially.
Yeah, and we would tell the accountants, what lines that should go to. They'd break it up and make sure that that's in line with the language that was passed, but we'll be in good shape on that.
Yeah.
So that should be fine.
Good.
So we don't need to have two budgets, which is great news to me, at least.
Yeah, well, it makes it easier.
So this is the free cash model as it stands right now, that you don't need to care about.
Oh, we didn't talk about the building either.
Oh, yeah.
The building?
Elm Court.
Oh, yes, we should talk about that.
Talk about that.
So these are the free cash certified amount that we have for this year is $1.1 million. And this model is all the things that we've talked about potentially putting money towards. And down here is if we were to spend on all of these, it would leave a total free cash reserve of $178,000. I'd like to have more than that. That's obviously up to the finance committee and select board. But our financial policies recommend somewhere between 3 and 5% of general fund budget be reserved in free cash. Were we to do that, and the general fund budget is around the $15 million, the 15.7 that it is in our current calculations, our reserve target would be around $473,000 if we do 3% of free cash. Obviously, there's other ways of having reserve funding. It can be in stabilization. It can be in other sources, but the free cash is nice because it's flexible and it's tangible, and we are monitoring that often. So landing around 473, slightly above or below, is probably a good place to be. Right now, you'll see that our financial policies recommend setting aside 1% of our operating fund into our operating general fund into stabilization. That would be $169,000. We certainly don't need to do that much in stabilization. We've talked about the drawbacks of it.
Which, to be fair, we haven't followed that policy ever.
Yep.
And it's good to have I'm not nicking the policy. I'm just so townspeople understand.
I think there's a line we want to walk. I think we don't necessarily need to do that full amount. That 1% is something that was recommended to get up to I think 10% of our operating budget being in this stabilization fund. Right now, we're, I think, at around 4% of our operating budget being in the stabilization account. That stabilization account has around $500,000 in it, give or take. I can find that exact number.
Yeah.
So the recommendation is to try to get that higher, up to at least $1 million, and putting in 1% of the operating budget each year would help you get there. If we put in something this year, it can be much less than the 169. At least makes a good faith effort to show it. Bond ratings agencies like seeing that. It gets us in good financial position, but we're already in a decent place, I would say.
And I will say, to add to that conversation, as far as free cash reserve, most years we've spent most of free cash every single year. And again, not nicking the policy. I think it's great that we have a policy, but
We don't normally have this much money in free cash either on an annual basis.
normally have this
So,
much money.
That's why in many other years, we've spent most of it because there really wasn't a whole lot there to begin with.
Right.
And you're trying to do some projects or knock some things off that list
Right,
that have
and
been
you've
on
been
it for a
covering
long
snow and
time.
ice with it.
Yeah.
So you need
Right.
to do that, and that's used up.
Right.
So, I mean, and for the town's purposes, honestly, like outside of what the bond raters like to see or whatever, but just from the town perspective, the 169 in stabilization or the 169 just being in free cash is really the same thing for us.
It's the same as to the town. And with the difference being free cash is easier to spend. Stabilization, you need, what, a 2/3 majority
2/3
coming out of
vote.
town meeting to spend
Yes.
that money.
Stabilization is easier to spend when you can spend it. When the timing is right to spend it. If the time, there's a period of time at which you can't spend it, but yes.
No, free cash.
Yes, I'm sorry, free cash. That's
Free
what I
cash
meant
you
to say,
can't
yeah.
spend from July to October, and it
Yes.
would require a town meeting vote anyway. Both of them require town meeting votes, but free cash would be just 50%. The stabilization is higher.
Yeah.
So if we move the 169 into free cash, that would get us the 347, which is a little below target of what you were looking for, but it's not bad.
Are mostly solving the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's easy to get rid of this. Like we earlier talked about, do we put some money towards some existing debt? Say the culvert project, which right now we're planning on that being either excluded or general fund debt. You could just make a larger payment toward it. I think it's excluded debt though, the culvert.
Yeah, it is.
But you
So
could
we
just change
could-
that,
so we
and
could-
there you go.
Yeah, so we could put,
So you could put
100,000 into stabilization
stabilization,
and you're still, you're
we're
right there.
still at a decent number in
Yeah.
free cash.
Yep. Let's do that.
And they're kind of fungible. So like
Yeah.
it's just one big number really.
Well, we had $100,000 on that sheet in the slides, correct?
Yes, well, we were just kind of placeholding.
Right, that and
for-
Obra, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, what did we do? Did we do 20,000 in
Yes.
Yes.
OPEB?
OPEB, yeah. You want
OPEB
to
was
do
20.
20.
Oh,
Do we believe that the MS4 number is closer to what we really need, or we're still waiting for
90 is
that?
correct at this moment.
It's a correct okay.
Yep.
I know we were,
We were carrying 150 before. 90 should be fine.
okay.
Stormwater is good. Hydrants. I mean, this is a question.
So what's the difference between the stormwater assessment and the MS4? Aren't they both kind of similar projects?
They are two separate projects. Stormwater asset management is looking at what we actually have, for the current infrastructure that exists and what we need to do with it. The MS4 compliance is much more about
How you manage
past
it?
reporting and permitting that
Okay.
we've done before, and then some regulations that we need to write and pass.
So
management,
so
like
the
building
asset
projects.
management, for example, we had on Main Street up near the sewer plant, we had the culvert that failed that needed to be replaced. That's part of what they need to do, is look at other culverts in town and such assets that control water when it's high.
Right, and that wouldn't necessarily be a part of the MS4 compliance. I think they want to know what our assets are. That might be a small part of it, but there's a lot more of a mapping and regulations and compliance that
And
are part of that,
engineers
so.
would come in and do that for us, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
We would
And the
contract an engineering
regulations
company
would
to do
be
it.
related to bylaws around like site plan review, management of
Construction,
stormwater for building
post-construction,
projects.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
And again, both are state, federal mandated things that need to be done.
The stormwater asset management isn't necessarily mandated, but it's a good project for us to do, and we're getting a significant amount of leverage from state funds. We're getting $100,000 from the states and just to spend a small local match.
Yeah.
So that's why that came about.
I think it's good.
Yeah, because that whole project is way more than the 27,000.
Yeah, that's right.
That's just the town's portion, and we're getting the other in grant money from the state, essentially, correct?
Yeah. So I think Elm Court's the biggest question mark here, to be honest. And I think there were some questions that came out about that last week or when the select board last met. But I'm not sure there's any questions on that from a finance committee perspective. That's
I
probably.
mean, I think we know what it is.
Yeah. And I know I raised some questions about it, and there was a discussion last week about how the project started and then what it became. And if I understand right, my memory is originally it was going to be one of those fabric dope hoop buildings, but once they got a price on that, they found out that putting up a steel building, Morton, Butler, whatever it is, I've never seen it, was very competitive and last a whole lot longer than a fabric building. Is that fair to say?
And it's not going to be used for storage of materials necessarily. It could be used for the plan right now is to do operations out of there for part of the DPW.
Part of the DPW. And, and we've been putting money into it for the last couple of years. And in some respects, it just makes sense to finish it. I think
this number would supposedly finish that project.
Would cement the floor, would add heat and electricity.
I think so. There's some heating issues and
Yeah.
And
I mean, and quite honestly, there's not many years where we have this much free cash, and it's probably worth
To try
it.
to, yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. There's a question of whether going forward, would we finish, be able to really,
Right.
short of like having to go borrow or some other,
Right.
which is becoming increasingly harder, more expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, every time we go borrow, it takes money away. We have plenty of borrowing capacity, but it takes money away from our general budget items.
Yes, we don't have money to pay it back.
Yes.
We have plenty of borrowing
Exactly.
capacity.
I think another part of our discussion about why we want to keep some free cash in reserve is there's also the school department has a significant piece of money, $150,000, if my memory is
That's
correct, in federal funding that could disappear at any time, I guess, from what they're hearing, because so many other places are losing federal funding for so many different things. And if that were to happen, that would be a huge hit for that budget, and maybe we could come back and take some of this free cash to cover that kind of a thing to keep the schools from having to suffer that much of a damage.
And certainly, if it occurred in line with the federal fiscal year in October,
Right.
it would be you'd be a quarter,
Yeah.
a quarter down already.
Right.
It would be really difficult to absorb that kind of hit in 3/4 of the year.
Right.
You'd have to step in to try to do something
Right.
for it, I think. It makes sense.
Well, and, even not only the schools, but there's just uncertainty everywhere. And so having a little cash on hand
What we
protects us a
what
little
we
bit.
think we're going to have to spend to purchase some of the vehicles that we want to purchase in the DPW budget to who knows what those numbers are going to be when we finally get the actual prices of things. We have an estimate on things, we have quotes on things, but we know that
It could be much higher.
they could be higher.
Yep.
Tariffs could cause that to change.
Absolutely.
And in May or June if we do pass this. So.
Right.
And it's not like that money's going to go anywhere. It'll still be there. And even if we don't spend it this year, it'll then be available to us next year to do some things with.
Sure.
And and the likelihood of us having $1 million next year is probably not very high.
No.
Well,
Of course, I
particularly,
didn't think we'd have it last year either, so whatever.
no, but particularly because, I mean, not that it's $1 million by any stretch of the imagination, but the adjustments that are made based on prior year's actual spending
Right.
should theoretically have the effect of reducing free cash.
Correct.
Would affect not our free cash tabulations this year, but the year after, I assume, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So this year we'll see.
Right, this year's
come up.
done,
This
but,
year
yeah.
is done.
But the
October, we'll
tighter,
find out
the
free
tighter
cash.
and tighter you get the budget to reality.
We expect a little less free
Yeah,
cash.
free cash.
Which is fine.
That's where a large portion of free cash, or say a portion of free cash comes from, is unspent budget lines.
Right.
Right.
Sometimes there are projects that wind up costing less than we think. Those don't get nearly as much publicity as the ones that cost more. Sometimes people think they're going to be able to go out and buy something, and then they don't have enough money to do that, so they can't buy it. So then money comes back to the town, or turns out it's not available, or you don't need whatever. But that's how we generate some amount of free cash, is from things that we budgeted for and didn't get spent. And sometimes it's revenue.
Right.
So for an example, last year we had investment income that was significantly higher than what we anticipated it being. So that led to, probably more than $100,000 in free cash, right?
Yeah.
It was around $200,000 more than estimated,
So that explains a big chunk of it.
which won't happen again the same way, because now we've got a better idea of what we think it will come in at. We
Right.
can estimate a little bit higher, which is good overall, because
Right.
for the budget.
Of course, the markets are crashing, so.
Wasn't going to mention that, but yes. we were on track to come in at a pretty good number for investment income. I haven't been told to reverse course on that, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the things that the town invests in are limited.
Oh, yeah, it's not,
Yeah, we're not
we're not
heavily invested in
Google.
the stock market or anything.
Yeah.
It's mostly very conservative
Yes.
things. Not that the bond market hasn't been jeopardized, but
No.
So on this note of the lease program, I mean, I think this is probably something we'll discuss further at the select board meeting. But if we do feel comfortable with the police cruiser just being straight free cash, wouldn't include it in the lease program, that leaves room for the DPW vehicles we talked about, and then potentially this boom mower and potentially the COA van. But we can finalize that on Tuesday. And those things would be warrant articles.
Right.
Actually, no, they wouldn't be warrant articles because they're
No.
just from the lease program.
Right.
The warrant article would be the cruiser.
Right.
Because that's for free
Right,
cash.
and part of the reason to put the cruiser on free cash is the cruiser, it's a fairly frequent item. Every couple of years, we're replacing a cruiser because of the amount of of how they're used.
Yeah.
They're just so, and quite honestly, in years past, we very often bought the cruisers through the free cash.
We'd be replacing a cruiser that's 8 years old this year.
Yeah.
We got our money's worth out of that one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right, so that's, I think, a good place to be for free cash. And I'll use this to finalize our draft of the warrant articles. Stabilization, we feel good about 100. If you wanted to take it down further, I understand it.
I'm
Yeah.
okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think not doing the debt makes plenty of sense. If we end up at
I think that's also a
397.
number that the town would like to see, that we're putting something into stabilization.
Right.
We end up at 397. The reserve target would be 473. I don't think that's a concern.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that looks good.
It would be one of the most robust free cash reserve numbers in recent memory.
Oh, yeah.
It would be for sure, but sometimes in the not so distant past, we did leave money in free cash because we had serious uncertainty around accounting that
Oh, yeah.
meant that you really didn't want to spend down to the wire because you might need that money to make correction.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
hopefully that's not going to be any kind of an issue
No,
going forward. But
hopefully that's behind us.
I'll say that we've been watching this very closely, and we know there's a few accounts that will be overspent on this year, but we know there's also a number of accounts we'll be underspent on. So I think we'll do a meeting after town meeting and make some votes about moving around some funds to make sure that we're set for this year. We're in good shape overall. Part of that, of course, is that we have a staff line item that hasn't been spent on since January. That's a larger one, and we'll be able to use funding there to help with some other accounts. But
Yep.
I don't think that's the major driver of things. So we're good for this year. I think we've fine-tuned the budget to be in good shape for next year. We'll go from there.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's hats off to all the managers in town that do a good job managing their budgets. And, you know, whether it's the school, the DPW, fire, police, they all do a great job. So.
yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And we, you know, like we said, the school coming in at 2.5% is great for us. It really
good.
makes things much easier in terms of getting the budget together and, you know, keeping the program that we all expect. I think it's with that schools.
So if we take a look at the big budget workbook, Daryl, as you asked in the beginning of the meeting, just what's the number? Right now we have a $32,000 surplus at the moment, which I don't think we want to go any further down than that, but that's a good place to be at the moment. And I think that our last meeting was helpful for, you know, checking those numbers and making sure that that's kind of the same as
It's
the real money that we're
it's
talking about.
significantly better right now than when we had to shut off the streetlights to save $8,000.
Yes.
That still remains an option if we need to do it. So, but I don't think we're going to.
It's also comforting to know that we're putting money into stabilization. We're keeping money in free cash. So if something does go awry, we have options.
Yeah.
But we don't expect it.
Yeah, and you know, I've been triple checking these numbers. We're generally on pace with kind of the accounting of last year. This spreadsheet lines up nicely with what our numbers looked like last year with a couple changes. And while it's the biggest change is just that there is, as Sean mentioned earlier, there's a lot more spending on the debt service because those numbers are hitting us this year. But that's fine. That's money in and money out because the decision was already made to exclude that debt and to pay for it. So that's a decision that residents have already made, and we'll be in good shape to pay that for this year.
And if you look right there between 24 and 25, right there to the 670, 140, that explains how you came below the levy limit.
Yeah.
Because you had capacity there that you didn't, you reduced actually your debt exclusion from 04 to 05.
Right. Had we spent the 882 in FY25,
Right.
that 62% would be way smaller.
Yes.
Right. And the minus 2.6% would not be minus 2.6%. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I will say that, you know, while we're doing everything under the confines of Proposition 2.5, which means that the overall increase from our levy limit from one year to the next is capped at 2.5%, which would make you think that everyone's taxes can only rise 2.5%. That just for residents to hear this, it doesn't necessarily work like that, in part because of the debt exclusions built in, and in part because of projections of new growth and other things. So because we were and because we were under the levy limit in the final taxation the year before. So putting all of that together, just from the baseline that we're projecting here, it would be closer to, say, an 8% increase in the average resident's tax bill. And that's completely normal just based on, what we're seeing here. But that is important for residents to hear. We can provide more information on that as needed.
Right, it's based on things that we did in prior years.
Yeah, the debt exclusion being a major driver.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
I think the big difference would probably be in the proposed debt exclusion that you have. I would anticipate that that would happen much more quickly than the sewer plant
Yes.
did.
Right.
I mean, the boilers you would do as soon as ASAP because you want to get them done by summer.
Probably
The paving you would get done.
Right.
I mean, there's, and then presumably the roof gets done this year. I mean,
As long as you can get a contractor.
yeah, if you can get a contractor to do. I mean,
that'll
there's
do
not. It's not the sewer plant is a very different animal. It's heavy design, and it doesn't start right away. It's a limited pool of people who are going to do that work, really.
Right.
So it's just a very different thing. I would expect most of that other stuff would be done relatively quickly.
Right.
I mean, certainly the boilers, we're targeting moving on them as fast as possible.
Right. Okay.
I mean, in terms of other big traditional items, there's not much to say. I mean,
No.
state aid is
Relatively flat.
stable. I mean, it's not, there's some additional money for schools, but
So
not significant.
A little
Like,
bit more in the Chapter 70 this
yeah, a
year than
little
we
bit
had last
more.
year.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
There's
A little bit more in Chapter 90 for road work.
that there's a
Chapter 90,
lot.
yeah.
There's quite a bit more in Chapter 90. And my understanding of that is that's because of the millionaire's tax is dedicated towards transportation and education. So our Chapter 90 money, which is not money, it's in here, but we don't appropriate it at town meeting because it's a direct grant from the state for the purposes of doing a specific thing, which is paving the roads, essentially. It doesn't show up as an appropriated sum, but it's a significant increase. It's almost doubled. So
36 to 401 under the governor's budget.
right. So
Great.
it gives if that's the number that finally comes in, that's going to allow us to do a lot more paving. I mean,
And
costs go up as well.
And another
but-
reason why Billings weighs on our debt exclusion is because we'll never have enough money to do all the paving that we have to do over the course of time. Roads will start to suffer and.
we never spend any money on paving
Right.
outside of Chapter 90.
Chapter 90, right.
So
You fall behind that way.
You fall
every
behind.
every town
Right.
does.
Right.
Billings Way is just it's an extension of the
Of
parking
the
lot.
parking lot, yeah.
Of the
And it's not that much money to do that either.
No.
no. And it's kind of a nightmare right now. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it's not in good shape
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it surrounds our historical society museum and one of our cemeteries. So come on, it's a whole area that is town property that we need to just take care of.
Yeah. Okay. So we're on for next Tuesday. Is that correct?
We are.
Yeah.
Joint meeting.
6:30.
6:30 with Finance Committee. We'll
yeah.
start Select Board at 6. Just they don't have a very long agenda before we all meet together. So we'll do 6:30 with everybody.
30 next week. Okay.
Are we?
And then that's when we'll actually, did we officially vote for the budget last week or
No,
we,
we'll do it Tuesday. I think.
so Tuesday we'll need to do
I
that.
think you'll need to, I guess, as you go through the warrant, you'll need to decide which warrant items the Finance Committee endorses. I
Yep,
guess,
Tuesday.
approves.
Yep.
Do you typically do that for every, or just the financial related ones? in the warrant?
Yes. We just do the
Mostly
financial.
just the financial.
But anything with a number in it, we'll have you.
Because the
approve.
29th is when we have to approve the warrant, correct?
I mean,
We have a couple days after if something should happen. We need to do it 8 days in advance of town meeting.
and the
That gives a
finance
little bit of
committee
breathing
could recommend things post that.
Yeah.
It just maybe wouldn't be printed,
Yeah, I would like to print it.
which
We've
We've
made,
done that before, yeah.
we've made changes night of.
Yeah.
Not big changes,
No,
but
yeah.
you just
And
never.
yeah, we're not totally done with the budget either. I think there's a few like little things to kind of clean up, right? Like around, we
Yeah,
have to look at a couple things.
that's fine.
Not,
And we'll meet before town meeting on the night of town meeting, correct?
Yes.
Just to finalize anything that might come
Yeah,
up.
we generally, if town meeting starts at 7, we meet at 6 o'clock generally.
excuse me.
Is there anything else that would be helpful from me? It is my first time doing this with this group. Is there anything else that would be helpful
No,
on the budget side?
this has been really good.
Yeah, it's
Could we
been
get
interesting.
hard copy of what might be in the proposed warrant to look at on Tuesday night? Because we'll be putting a hard copy, either making it available or part of the warrant for town meeting night, correct?
Yeah,
A hard copy.
I'll print it that day,
Yeah.
on Tuesday when we have something.
Can you just email me a copy of where we are with the budget?
Would you all like the workbook?
Yeah.
Yeah, just, yeah.
Great. And what I'm going to do is we'll post that presentation, the updated version, on the town's website, I think, as well. Just because if anyone wants to find, I'll speak directly to you, residents of Hatfield. If anyone wants to find the updated presentation, since we did change that a little bit during this meeting, we'll post it on the website, so that's available for you all to look at.
We can add the building too to the free cash thing that we have on there.
Which thing?
The building, it's a significant amount of money, so
Which building?
Elm Court.
Onto your
That's, yeah, we should add that to the free cash. Yep.
I don't think there was any, I mean,
There was nothing on
we could
your
put the,
initial, but it should
no,
be
there
on
wasn't.
that
It should be on-
slide.
Yeah,
Yeah, it should
something
be,
happened there.
should be part of that.
But the 27th, do you want, we could put the stormwater management on there, the 27,000 if you want to.
Well, that's,
I mean, it's been going
that
on
was,
a while, but.
that was voted on last year.
Yeah.
And it was just a technical error that left it out of an actual appropriation. So
I think,
hopefully folks can get on board
don't
with
think
it.
it needs to be part. And I will say thank you to Andrew and Sean for putting the
Absolutely.
presentation was very good. It really hopefully gives residents a clear idea of what's coming.
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
All right.
Anything else?
No,
Okay,
Thanks for listening.
thank you.
thank you. See you all on town floor. When is it? May 7th?
May 13th.
May 13th.
is town meeting. Someone will make a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned.